Alright guys, we're going to do a couple more examples of these rational functions. The last ones we were able to just find the asymptotes and the intercepts. Now sometimes you'll have to simplify that rational function, and when you cross things out, you're going to end up having a hole or a point of discontinuity. So we're going to take a look at a couple examples of that. So like if I look at this one, right away I notice that x squared minus 4 can be factored. That's going to be x minus 2 and x plus 2 if I factor out x squared minus 4. And then I notice that I have x minus 2's that can actually cancel out, which would simplify this to be 1 over x plus 2. So since I could cancel out x minus 2, so when x equaled 2, or positive 2, we are going to have a hole. So we're going to have a hole at 2 for the x value, and then let's plug 2 in to find out what the y value would be. So that would be 2 plus 2, which gives me 1/4. Okay, so that means we're going to have a hole at 2 1/4. So I'm going to go to 2 1/4 and make a open dot, or a hole. Okay, now our vertical asymptote is the same thing. Now we're going to use that new function that we looked at, 1 over x plus 2. Set the bottom equal to 0. So we have x equals negative 2 is our vertical asymptote. Okay, negative 2. So then our horizontal asymptote, we set the bottom, we look at our degree, the bottom's bigger, so it's going to be y equals 0. Alright, now we have to find our intercept, so our x-intercept, so we're going to plug 0 in for y. Well, if I plug in for y, or to set the top equal to 0, it's not going to equal 0, it's just 0 equals 1, so we won't have an x-intercept. Okay, so now when I do my y-intercept, we plug 0 in for x, so I get 1 over 0 plus 2, which is 1/2. So we have a y-intercept at 0 1/2, which I plotted on the graph. Now I'm going to go ahead and graph my rational function. Okay. And remember, if you want, you can plot some more points, or you can just make a sketch on the other side. It's whatever works for you. Now let's do our domain and our range. I'm going to zoom up a little bit. So our domain, okay, it starts at negative infinity, and it goes to the asymptote at negative 2. Then it starts back up at negative 2 and goes to our hole, which is at positive 2. And then it goes from positive 2 to positive infinity. We're just looking at left to right. Now our range, it goes on forever on the bottom, so it's going to be negative infinity all the way up to our asymptote, which is going to be at 0. Then it starts back up at 0 and hits the hole again, which is at 1/4. And then it goes from 1/4 to positive infinity. Big thing here, make sure that you pay attention to the hole. Some people forget to put that into their domain and range. Alright, well, let's look at this example, very similar. Now notice right away I have to factor the top and the bottom, because I can factor the top as x plus 1, x minus 1. And the bottom I can actually factor to be x minus 5 and x plus 1. So I notice my x plus 1's cancel. So this is actually going to be x minus 1 over x minus 5. Okay. So I'm going to have a hole at when x equaled negative 1. So at negative 1 is my x value. So let's plug that in to figure out what the y would be. So negative 1 minus 1, minus 1 over negative 1 minus 5, which gives us negative 2 over negative 6, which gives us positive 1/3. So it's going to be at negative 1 1/3. So I made my hole there. Now our vertical asymptote, we set the bottom equal to 0. So x minus 5 equals 0 would give us x equals positive 5. Our horizontal asymptote, well, they have degree, they both are just x. So our coefficients are technically 1 over 1, which would be y equals 1. So I graph those asymptotes, now find our x-intercept. So I'm going to set the top equal to 0, so it's going to be x minus 1 equals 0, which gives me x equals positive 1. So it's going to be 1 0 is our x-intercept. Right, and our y-intercept, we're going to plug 0 in for our x's, so 0 minus 1 over 0 minus 5, which gives us negative 1 over negative 5, which gives us 1/5. So it's going to be 0 1/5 is our y-intercept. Okay, now I have those, I can go ahead and graph that in. And then I can go ahead and graph the other side as well. Right, now let's do our domain and range. Okay, the domain starts going left forever, so it'll be negative infinity, all the way to our hole, which is at -1. Then it starts back up after the hole and goes to our asymptote at 5. And then it starts back up after that asymptote and goes from 5 to positive infinity. And now our range, we're going to go, it starts at the bottom going forever, so it'll be negative infinity to our hole at 1/3. Oh, 1/3. Okay. Then it starts back up and goes from 1/3 to our asymptote at 1. And then it goes from 1 to positive infinity. Right, and that's our range.